Where can you find 6,000 local businesses with just one click? EverythingMidmo.com.
Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Courtside View webcast, brought to you by TigerExtra.com. We are going to talk a little bit about Missouri's effort in the South Padre Island Invitational. Missouri places second. Over the weekend, they beat the Old Dominion Monarchs, then they lose to Richmond. They score 66 against Old Dominion and 59 against Richmond. What was the matter with the offense down there?
Well, the biggest thing is both Old Dominion, particularly in the second half, and then Richmond the entire game, kind of took Missouri out of their comfort zone, didn't let them run, slowed the tempo down. And Missouri is just not real good right now at half-court execution. It's interesting, I talked to some of the players yesterday about what they need to do to be better at executing in those kind of situations, and the main answer I got was we need to force the issue with the tempo so that we're not in those situations. They're not a team that spends a lot of time on running half-court offense. Mm-hmm. You know, if you go to one of their practices, they're constantly moving up and down the floor, and that's the way that Mike Anderson wants to play, and he wants his team to do that at all costs, and so that's what he's going to focus on most.
Although last year they were not bad in half courts. They had a great assist-to-turnover ratio and got pretty good shots, it seemed like.
They did, and I think, you know, a couple of things. Number one, I'm not sure this team is as good a shooting team as last year's. I say that despite the fact that they shot the ball really well against Texas Pan American and Chattanooga last week at home. If you take away those two games, the other three, they're shooting 23% from beyond the three-point arc right now. And I know that's a small sample size, but you add in the exhibition games, and they only made 7 of 33 from three-pointers in those two games. You're starting to see a trend. I don't think they're a great perimeter shooting team when teams zone them. And I also don't think they have an inside presence like DeMarre Carroll or Leo Lyons last year that teams have to respect. So teams aren't collapsing around them. Those guys inside, those shots are more contested than they were a year ago. And I think we also can't, downplay the importance of just how good Carroll and Lyons were at catching bad passes and turning them into things. Both those guys had great hands, and I'm not sure that the replacements are on that level right now.
You don't see Lawrence Bowers as a guy that is kind of equal to Leo offensively?
I don't think right now. I think he has the potential to be equal to Leo offensively, but right now he's averaging 11 points a game against not very good competition for the most part, and Leo last year averaged almost 15 points a game for the season, and went for 30 against a Big 12 opponent in Baylor. I mean, I think Leo was pretty good. I mean, and I think Lawrence Bowers can get there, but he's not there yet. And they don't have, even if he becomes, a Leo Lyons, and I think he's really more similar to Carroll. They don't have the two-man tandem that made them so good last year.
I think kind of the thing with Missouri, too, is they got a lot of good basketball players who aren't necessarily great shooters, like Tiller or Zaire Taylor, who are good players by anybody's estimation, but just aren't guys who are going to stand out there and, if you leave them open, necessarily make three-pointers. So, I don't know, sometimes I think maybe they miss Matt Lawrence more than people would have expected.
Completely agree. Absolutely. I mean, he was, and I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, but he was a very consistent guy for them, and they don't have that. And not only do they not have that, they didn't have, they had a guy like Kim English last year to kind of fill in when Lawrence wasn't making shots from the perimeter, and they're missing that this season.
Now, last year they went to Puerto Rico. They lost to Xavier. Is it all comparable to what you saw this year? I mean, it's a mid-major team, and you lose a game, but it was close. I mean, they went on to have a great season last year, obviously. Is this game a cause for concern in your mind?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I say this. I think Richmond's pretty good. I do, but they're not as good as that Xavier team was last year. I mean, that team, I don't think they were ranked at the time, but they ended up being ranked a lot of the year. And I mean, that was a good team. Everybody knew who they were going into the year nationally. I think Richmond has a chance to be pretty good. I was really impressed with their guards. I think they've got pretty good depth. I thought they executed well against Missouri and against Mississippi State. But that said, I don't think they have the ceiling that Xavier did last year. I don't think they're as athletic or as talented. And I think going forward, as we look ahead to what Missouri is going to have to face, the Big 12 is tougher this season than it was a year ago. So I think Missouri is going to have to play at a higher level to have anywhere near the same kind of success. I don't think I think we're realistic enough to know that this year's team's probably not going to be as good as last year's team. But even to be a tournament team, I think it's a tougher road than it was last year at this time.
For Missouri, Kim English has really been kind of a wide swing in his good games and his bad games so far. He's had some kind of horrendous shooting games, and then there's a 2-game stretch there where he got his career high 2 games in a row. Is he just going to be, you think, a streaky shooter, and there's going to be ups and downs, or do you think, again, we're dealing with a small sample size, and maybe he can be more of a consistent scorer for them?
Well, I think he's going to put up points fairly consistently, but in terms of making shots consistently, he scored reasonably well in South Padre Island, but didn't shoot the ball well at all. He was 1 for 10 from 3-point range, and in the second game against Richmond, I think he was 3 for 12 from the floor overall. He's not the consistent shooter that Matt Lawrence was last year. Against Old Dominion, Kimmy made 1 of 7 threes. Matt Lawrence had, I believe, 3 games all last season where he missed 6 3-pointers. And really only, in 2 of those, he made more than 1. So you were getting more bang for your buck with him. I think Kimmy does other things. He did a great job of getting to the free throw line against Richmond, and that's something that he's going to be better at than Matt Lawrence, really ever was here. But he's not going to be the consistent 40% knockdown shooter that I think Lawrence really was. And I don't think fans appreciated that enough.
I just think that was just such a key thing, because when you got, like we mentioned, guards who are not necessarily great shooters in Tiller and Taylor, you would like them to get to the basket, but it's harder if things are all clogged up because you're not extending the defenses, which you've seen them more than I have, but is that what you're seeing, that teams are able to sag a little bit?
I don't think Richmond wasn't sagging. I think it's not just not having Lawrence, it's also not having guys inside that command double teams and get open looks. And I also think, if we really look at it, Carroll and Lyons weren't necessarily big 3-point shooters, but they knocked down outside shots, 15, 18-footers, fairly consistently last year. And that at least made the defense have to adjust to them and left other guys open. Matt Lawrence got a lot more open looks, I know, last year than Kimmy English is going to find this season.
When last we spoke, JT Tiller was injured, and nobody was quite sure how bad. He finally got back on the court there in South Padre. How did he look? Did the foot slow him down any?
I don't think so. I think, he seemed back to normal. He was forcing the issue a little bit early in the Old Dominion game, I think just not playing a couple of games. But in terms of physically, I think he looked fine.
All right. Crowd estimation, they play at Vanderbilt on Wednesday, and then they come home and for the Big 12 Pac-10 Hardwood series against Oregon, which is a team that's really struggling. What sort of crowd do you think they'll get on Saturday?
Well, if we used last year's Cal game as a barometer, they got 8,310 people for that. I think it'll probably be a little bit higher because I think more people are interested in Missouri basketball based on last year, but I don't think this team is as encouraging to this point as that team was. So I think it'll probably be a little bit over that, but probably not up to 10,000 or whatever.
And lastly, the Big 12 is top-heavy, obviously, this year. You've got the number 1 and number 2 teams in the nation with Kansas and Texas. Maybe just the best win you've seen so far from a Big 12 team?
Well, it's really kind of hard to find them. There haven't been too many super impressive ones. You kind of expect Kansas and Texas to win, so that they're kind of out. Kansas State beat a ranked Dayton team in San Juan, which was pretty good. But I think Texas A&M kind of takes the prize here right now because they beat Clemson and Minnesota out in Anaheim last week after losing to West Virginia. But those 2 wins, despite that loss to the Mountaineers, got them into the top 25 this week. And so I think that's the team right now that has the best record.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve. Tune in again next week when we'll discuss the Vanderbilt game and the Oregon game, and look forward to the following week.